Hello, my name is Laurel Smith, and today is day 81 of the Richmond Public Library's 100 Days RVA Reads, a program promoting PBS and WCVE's The Great American Read. Today I'm at Ardent Brewery at 3200 West Lee Street in Richmond, which is one of my favorite breweries in Richmond. Today we're going to talk about 1984 by George Orwell, but it's not so much because I admire this book. Just as a summary, 1984 is a book in which one man living in a totalitarian society a number of years in the future gradually finds himself rebelling against the dehumanizing forces of an omnipotent, omniscient dictator. Encouraged by a woman who seems to represent the political and sexual freedom of the pre-revolutionary era, and with whom he sleeps in an ancient house that is one of the few manifestations of a former world, he writes down his thoughts of rebellion, perhaps rather imprudently, as a 24-hour clock ticks in his grim, lonely flat. In the end, the system discovers both the man and the woman, and after a period of physical and mental trauma, the protagonist discovers he loves the state that has oppressed him throughout and betrays his fellow rebels. The story is intended as a warning against and a prediction of the natural conclusions of totalitarianism. So while this summary is likely familiar to anyone who read 1984 in high school, it could just as easily describe a work of much lesser renown, the novel called We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. The characters in We are numbered rather than named. Instead of 1984's Winston Smith, you have D503, and instead of Julia, I330. Its big brother is known as the benefactor, a more human figure than Orwell's almost mythical dictator, who at one point phones D503. And where Orwell's apartments come complete with an all-seeing telescreen, Zamyatin's buildings are simply made of glass, allowing each of the residents and the guardians who police them to see in whenever they want. We has Airstrip 1, and We's Airstrip 1, or Oceana, is called One State. Instead of puzzling over 2 + 2 = 5, its lead character is disturbed by the square root of 1. The similarities are rife throughout the entire novel. And more disturbingly, Orwell even reviewed We in 1946. And the review can be read as a first draft of the changes he felt were necessary to implement his own manuscript. For example, he discusses Zamyatin's glass houses and specifically refers to the fact that televisions were not yet invented at this time that the novel was written. Orwell adapted the concept of glass houses and constant monitoring by the state in his telescreens, reflecting the change in culture he identified in his review. Ironically, Orwell also criticized Huxley for deriving Brave New World from We, a claim that Huxley fervently denied, and which is a loose association at best compared to Orwell's own distillation of the novel. Part of why I feel so strongly about this misuse of Zamyatin's work and the plagiarism inherent is that Orwell is basing his work on someone's personal experience. Zamyatin was himself exiled 3 times in his life, and although he was living in the Soviet Union when he wrote We, he was a member of the party in power and supported the October Revolution until the party's censorship began to affect his own life. And when Zamyatin attempted to publish We, it became the first banned book in the country's history. Zamyatin responded by smuggling the manuscript out of the country, where it was translated and published in English and more predominantly in French. Copies were printed and smuggled across the border into the Soviet Union. But when Zamyatin's rebellion against censorship was discovered, he was banned from ever publishing any work at all in the country, ever again. This prompted Zamyatin to apply for exile for the 3rd time in his life. This time, he appealed directly to Stalin, citing the death of his career as a writer as the cause for his need to leave the country. Stalin granted the request, and Zamyatin was exiled to Paris, where he died 3 years later in extreme poverty. People often cite the difference between D503's relationship with the benefactor and Winston's lack of a relationship with Big Brother as one of the primary differences between the novels. But Zamyatin was clearly writing based on his own impressions or experiences. Similar to Zamyatin, D503 was a supportive member of the one state. D503 is confused and disoriented by one state and how it relates to his own desires, a feeling that was likely similar to an author who was exiled multiple times, only to return to his home each time. Winston, on the other hand, is racked with doubts about Oceania. Orwell identified that acceptance of a totalitarianism government would be difficult for European readers to relate to, and especially after living through a world war. Unfortunately, when the discussion of Orwell's plagiarism is prompted, his defenders come out in droves, citing the common idea that there are no new stories under the sun. Yet few novels of such acclaim go so far in mimicking the work of another author. Some critics have gone so far as to say that Orwell did Zamyatin a favor, since the Russian novel would not be so well known without Orwell's interference. Doubts have been cast on another beloved Orwell work, Animal Farm, which some believe was derived from Nikolai Kostomarov's Animal Riot. Orwell has an established place as a hero writer, and it seems he can do no wrong in the eyes of the public. Just this week, the personal archives of George Orwell, containing the author and journalist's first phrasing of the sinister slogan from 1984, "War is peace, ignorance is strength, freedom is slavery," have been added to the UNESCO's register of the world's most significant documents. The idea was earlier expressed in "we" as when human beings still lived in the state of freedom, that is, an unorganized, primitive state. Ultimately, Orwell's place in history is fixed, but I cannot help but chafe at the idea that his plagiarism of "we" does not matter and should not color our reading of the novel. In 1984, Winston's job is to rewrite and censor publications. Clearly, Zamyatin was not the only writer pulling from his personal experience. I hope that this has made you think a little bit more about the novels that are so commonly read in our schools, and I highly encourage you to read both Zamyatin's original work and 1984 so that you can see the difference that a person's culture and choice of audience brings to your experience of a novel. Please continue to follow the Richmond 100 Days Reads. Have a great day.